Welcome to my bed, the perfect place to talk about erotic thrillers because having sex with me is terrifying. Sorry to my parents.
It's a straight girl's fantasy come true, right?
So I watched Fresh a few days ago after its release on Disney+. Please blame my sister's love of The Mandalorian for that subscription. The mouse is evil and he must be taken down. And since watching this film, I have not been able to get it off my mind. A quick and slightly spoilery recap for anyone who hasn't seen it. Noah, played by normal people alum Daisy Edgar Jones, meets Sebastian Stan's Steve in the supermarket. They arrange a drink, spend a few weeks hanging out, and eventually go away together. On the way out of town, they stop at his house for a night, and this is where things ramp up as he drugs her, chains her up in his very bougie basement, and reveals to her that he harvests human meat to sell to the super wealthy. So yeah, it's a cannibalism film. Delicious. And here's the thing. Fresh is, as many of us are probably resistant to admitting because we don't want to seem vapid or like we've missed the point, sexy as hell. Eroticism and depravity have gone hand in hand in cinema and in real life since day one. Both concepts center around pushing people's limits, physical desires, touch, and what are the boundaries we have to exist within to be good people. The erotic thriller is a widespread and popular genre, as is horror with sexual undertones. I see eroticism and depravity almost as two sides of the same coin, and they can both be tantalizing ideas to explore on screen. Personally, I love these type of films that blur the line between sex, fear, pleasure, self-destruction. Black Swan, Hellraiser, Martyrs, The Cell, Suspiria, Possession, Audition. There are so many amazing films exploring these ideas. There's also a lot of shit that uses sex and violence so cheaply because Hollywood is aware of its appeal. As I talked at length in my previous video, so much of this violence against women in cinema leaves a bad taste in my mouth. However, Fresh, a film about harvesting human meat, particularly that of women, I absolutely loved. And one of the big differences I look to is the female writing and direction. Hostel 2 is a film that I ever so slightly touched on in my previous video because it's a perfect example of how gleeful violence against women in films can be. Particularly the death of Heather Matarazzo's character is so clearly supposed to evoke something erotic. She is naked, bound and gagged, hung from the ceiling, but still positioned in such a way that we see the curve of her body and the length of her neck. Hostel wants us to see this scene as sexy. There's no denying it. But on top of that, she's also being absolutely torn to shreds, and it's depicted very graphically. But when it comes to Fresh, despite its subject matter, women getting surgically spliced and eaten by rich old men, the film actually rarely shows the violence inflicted on these women. Their mutilated bodies are not shown off, and they're not there for the pleasure of the viewer. We have an absolutely crisp understanding of what is going on without needing to see horrific imagery of brutalized women. And don't get me wrong, later in the film we have another character who has her head bashed in, I think with a spade. But the camera doesn't linger and the character is fully closed, and it's a key moment both to furthering the narrative and the themes. It's not there just for the sake of it. I was really wowed in Fresh by how tense and frightening I found it despite the lack of visible violence. I saw a review on Letterboxd complaining about how in the film you see a full frontal image on a phone of a penis, but we don't even see much gore, and they were lamenting this choice in the film. But isn't this the same thing that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was praised for? The way it makes you feel as if you've seen something horrific, but when you really zero in on what's actually shown on screen, there isn't much violence at all. This Letterboxd user was dissatisfied by this, but maybe this film isn't for you. I'm tired of seeing women's mangled bodies on screen, and I think the notable absence of excessive violence against the female characters in Fresh, despite them being the main characters, is a powerful and purposeful choice, one that I'm delighted and unsurprised that a female director would make. Because Mimi Cave understands you don't need it. that's not where the fear lies. The fear lies in betrayal, because we trusted Steve. It's okay to find Sebastian Stan sexy in this role. Hell, it's okay to find Steve hot when we've been lulled into a false sense of security by his character and likely grown up being taught to submit to charming men in our actual lives. Someone's physicality contributes so much to how we perceive them. And someone with a beautiful smile is statistically proven to register as more trustworthy and kind. There is such a specific kind of betrayal in discovering that a beautiful person can do evil things. Because at some point you realise they never made you any promises about who they were. Steve never shows himself as a particularly good or honourable person. And ultimately Noah only has herself to blame for instinctively trusting him. In young women, this is very much taught, so in many ways, no, this is not Noah's fault. But who else can you blame when you wake up chained to the floor by a beautiful man that you never really knew anything about? We will ourselves to believe that people like this are good people, and we submit because we don't want to question whether someone beautiful might actually be bad. Another film that I watched recently that really captured me was Jane Campion's In the Cut. It plays with many of the same ideas. It's sensual and nasty and tapped into this duality of the erotic and the depraved. The film centres around a university lecturer who becomes intimately involved with a detective investigating a series of female murders in her area. She begins to suspect that he may even be involved, but keeps sleeping with him because he's Mark Ruffalo. She wants to believe his allure rather than question it, despite the red flags. And there's so much nuance in all of this. I remember the uproar when Zach Braff? I remember the uproar when Zac Efron was cast as Ted Bundy in Horribly Wicked and Something Terribly Vile. Horribly Wicked and Incredibly Vile. I don't know what that film is called. Because people felt like casting a former teen heartthrob and certified hot person was romanticizing Ted Bundy, even though Bundy was very much romanticized in real life. It wasn't bad casting at all. And I do think there are problems with incredibly attractive actors being cast as serial killers because it subconsciously contributes to the ways that people perceive attractive people in real life. Tumblr blogs that publish horny fan fictions on Jeffrey Dahmer are a perfect example of how bad this can really get. It's a minority, thankfully, but some people are drawn to this depravity in others. However, as with any situation in life, false equivalences are rife. And Steve being played by someone who looks like Sebastian Stan isn't necessarily the same as another hot actor being cast as another serial killer. Because this casting isn't contributing to the problem, it's commenting on it. Fresh knows we're going to be torn by our curious attraction to Steve, and that's what makes him more terrifying. Because even as a viewer, you're still under his charm, questioning whether the situation is better because at least your captor is attractive, and knowing that you might have fallen into the same trap despite the red flags. We are so willing to alter our personal morals when we're manipulated by physical attraction. But even this is flipped in Fresh. Steve's assurance that he's charmed Noah to the point of still wanting to sleep with him shows that men are aware of this dynamic and ready to use it. But ultimately, this becomes his downfall. He underestimates Noah's will to survive, thinking that this eroticism overrides her natural survivor's instinct. But no, because in real life, no matter how attractive the perpetrator, when women are suffering at the hands of men, we are never not thinking about every chance we have to escape. Whether the human meat trafficking be an allegory for sexual assault or physically and emotionally abusive relationships or the commodifying of women's bodies, it's a strong statement on the lack of authority women have within their own lives and the internal and external fight against this. Be beautiful, be gentle, submit, and one day you might get the chance to bite someone's dick off. On a lighter note, the fact that Steve gets his dick bitten off is just funny, and I loved it personally. I know some people will see this as another film that's created by evil feminists and ultimately made to demonize and humiliate men. And if you see it that way, this film is the height of that symbolism. But I honestly don't have time to argue with those people. Eat a dick, babes. Eat a dick. New angle just dropped. Fresh manages to empower without feeling like a lame girl boss movie. And this is a big difference I'm always on about. Lauryn Kahn and Mimi Cave are not out to create some feminist icon in Noah or in her best friend Molly. They're just women surviving the horrors that have been forced on them, as we do in real life. The filmmakers don't have to trick us into watching a film about women because it's just a really good f***ing film. Brilliantly acted, beautifully paced, stunning to look at. Whether you consciously receive the messaging about the way women exist in society and what they're subjected to, often at the hands of men, or not, Fresh is just damn enjoyable to watch. Also, I honestly swear when writing this and both the other videos that I made, I'm not trying to make feminist videos or essays damning male creators or characters, but I find always that I just can't not talk about gender. These essays are personal, and the way I view film is so influenced by my life as a woman. It is my lens. So that's Fresh. A tasty, horny nightmare. I feel like there's so much more to be said and so many details in the script worth discussing, but that's my initial take, and I implore you to check it out. If after watching Daisy Edgar-Jones in Normal People you were just craving watching her getting her arse eaten, then this is the film for you. Am I a bad feminist? I don't know.